Hey, it's Brock here from Rock Hill Farms, and today I'm going to do a little chainsaw comparison. What I'm primarily comparing is the Stihl MS250 and the Stihl MS271. Now, besides the fact that both of these saws are available to me right now, the main reason that I'm comparing those two saws is whenever I went to buy a chainsaw, it came down to those two for me as a first chainsaw purchase. And I later ended up upgrading to the 391, but I still use the 250 a lot. Anyway, we're going to also put a chain on the 391. We'll stick it a little bit into the comparison, but primarily it's not a fit comparison. I'm going to compare that one later to the 261, which is closer to the same price range. So I'd used a few chainsaws over the years, but when I went to buy my first chainsaw, a couple of different people said a good first chainsaw for you would be the 271. So I went over to the local dealership to buy a 271. So the salesman asked me, what am I going to do with it? And when I was describing how much wood I thought I'd cut, he said the 271's a good saw, but I don't think you need that big of a saw. I think you could do better with the 250. The price difference normally between these two saws is about $60. They had the 250 on sale, and I was able to get it for about $90 cheaper. He said it's going to feel like the same saw if you're just using it occasionally, and you're going to save a lot of money. He recommended the 250, so that's what I bought. I've used the 250 a lot. It's been a good saw, no complaints about it, but I've been using it for close to 2 years now. And then my son-in-law just got this 271. It's a used saw. It might be a little bit older than mine, so we're comparing two used saws, which is the best comparison I can give. They both had a 16-inch bar on them. I'm switching both of them to an 18-inch bar, not necessarily for the comparison, but just because I want an 18-inch bar on mine, and I want them to have brand new chains for the comparison, and I want them to have the same size bar and chain. So, before we start cutting, we're going to get new chains and new bars on both saws. I've already got the new bar on the 271, and we cut with it a little bit, but we're going to put a brand new chain on it again today for the speed comparison. So before we get into cutting, let's just talk about the differences according to the spec sheet. So this 250 is a 45cc saw, and the 271 is a 50cc. The 250 is 2.2 horsepower. This is 2.6 horsepower. So depending on how you look at it, you're at like a 10 or a 15% increase in power. We'll see how that translates to actually cutting. The next thing is weight. So you don't want too heavy of a saw. So with this, you're getting a 10-pound saw. This is a 12-pound saw. I went into a Stihl chainsaw forum and I asked for other differences about these two saws that aren't on the spec sheets. There's a lot of knowledgeable guys in there, and the only other difference that was pointed out to me is that the 271 is a stratified engine, which means it's trying harder to meet emission standards by pulling in more clean air. I'm no small engine expert. I don't really know what that means. They describe that as a little bit of a con. We'll see if we notice any difference, or if that's something that's more of a long-term problem that you might notice with it down the road. Alright, so let's get these things set up with the new chains, and then see if we can find a good uniform diameter log to do a speed test on. So one thing to know if you're thinking about upgrading to an 18-inch bar is that even though these saws are very similar, they don't take the same bar. I was surprised by that. Alright, this is going to be one of those times when I'm hoping to learn something from the people watching. What I've got here is two brand new bars. This is a .325 by .063 18-inch bar rated for the Stihl MS250. This is the same .325, .063 18-inch bar rated for the MS271. If you line up the ends of the slot, those two bars aren't the same length. Now that might be because the housing on the 271 sticks out further. We'll find that out in just a minute when we get both of these on and see if they both stick out the same distance from the saw. One cool little update I'd like to share today is that I just ordered an Alaskan chainsaw mill, and we're going to start milling some wood with the 391, and if I stick with the Alaskan mill, I may upgrade to a larger saw for that. I was about to order a full-size sawmill, kind of on the cheaper side, but still a full mill, a bandsaw mill, and everywhere I looked was going to be at least a 6-month, if not a 1-year wait to get one. So I said I'm going to get one of these Alaskan chainsaw sawmills and kind of learn the process before I put in an order for something like that that's got such a long wait time. So the idea on the sawmill, besides the fact I've always just thought that it'd be cool to have a sawmill, is so I've got access to some trees now. Quite a few on this property and a couple other places I think I can get access to the logs and the trees. But in addition to just wanting to try it and learn about it, I've got a couple of structures that need to be built on this property, and I love the idea of building them completely out of lumber that I cut from the property. The main thing I'm talking about being a gift shop for the Christmas trees. We need an old rustic looking barn on the property, and the more it looks like it's been there 100 years, the better. But the best way that I can think of to achieve that without spending a bunch of money is to rough cut the wood. But you've always got a mix of people watching the channel, and there's people watching right now that know more and have forgotten more about chainsaws than I'm ever going to learn. There's also people who searched this video because it's their first saw and they're just trying to learn how to get started. So for those people, I'm putting this on with the Stihl markings up, but the next time I take this bar off or the next time I take the chain off, I'll put it on the other way. And that's so you get it to wear evenly on both sides. One thing to note that I didn't mention earlier, that these are both 825, 325, 18-inch chains, but this one has a 68 here and that one's a 74. So the 74 goes for the MS271, the 68, I believe that's the number of links, just out of context from this, and it goes on the 250. Alright, so the box for both of these bars says it's an 18-inch bar. It shows a little diagram of the distance between the base of the saw, where the dogs are at, and the end. They both say 18 inches. But in reality, your bar on the 271 sticks out at least an inch further than the bar on the 250. 18 inch says it on the bar. I'm going to get a tape measure, see how far out they actually come from the saw. Alright, so if we measure on this 271 from the housing to the end of the chain, it's 18 inches. Now on the 250, we measure it the same way. It is 16 7/8. So, hopefully, someone comes in the comments and makes this understandable for me. But a brand new Stihl 18-inch bar on a Stihl saw is not giving you an 18-inch cut. If all of them were the same in that regard, I wouldn't think much of it. But the other saw gives you the length listed on it. Let's check on this saw. This is a 25-inch bar on this Stihl 391. To the end of it is 25 inches. So, I'd love to hear from you guys. Why is this not 18 inches? Anyway, enough about that. Let's move on to the comparison. I'm gonna see if I can find a good log, get it lifted up, we'll time some cuts, and then I'll give you my thoughts on if I was looking for a first chainsaw or an only chainsaw or an upgrade, which of these, or maybe neither of them, would I be more likely to pick up? So without two brand new saws, and really even with two brand new saws, it's hard to have a perfectly fair comparison. But I found a log that's smaller than the width of the bar, but still pretty decent size. It seems to be the same diameter for at least, 2 feet there, so I can get several cuts in. So the way I'm gonna do this is I'm gonna start the saw, and as soon as the saw is started, I'm gonna start a timer. I'm gonna let the saw run for 2 minutes. Then I'm going to pick it up and run the throttle a little bit, make sure it's not trying to bog down or cut out whenever I give it gas. And then when the timer hits the 3-minute mark, I'll put the saw into the wood. I'm going to make 3 cuts in a row and then see how long it takes me. Then I'll do the exact same process with the other one. Give it 3 minutes to warm up and make sure it's running good. Make 3 cuts and time it. That's going to be the best comparison I can have on how fast does it cut. All right, we'll run the 250 first. All right, we'll give that 2 minutes to warm up. Alright, that's the 2-minute mark. It's running good. I'll have my chaps on in the next test, but I'm going to grab the helmet for this one. 2 minutes and 50 seconds. Alright, that took 37 seconds to make 3 cuts with the MS250. Now we'll do the same thing with the 271. I'm going to put my chaps on because it's always a good thing to do. Then I'll warm the saw up and give it that 3 minutes, same as I did the other one. I just love working with wood. Even though this isn't the best looking piece, starting to rot out right here, still kind of cool. Let's run the exact same process on the other saw. Here goes the 270. The other one, first time messing with them today, the other one took 2 pulls, that one was 1. Let it warm up. While we're waiting, those are some beautiful trees up there. I just love having a little bit of wooded area on the property. Alright, so I was checking that with each saw. As it finished each cut, I would glance at that before I sunk the blade in. And the first cut on the 271 was faster than it was on the 250. Then it started to bog just a little bit halfway through the second cut. I kind of let up on it, revved it, and then sunk back in. And I ended up losing some time. The saw did not run the way it's supposed to run. It's a little bit older saw maybe. Maybe it's had a little bit rougher life, or maybe it needs a little bit of adjustment from the carburetor. But anyway, the result was the first saw, the MS250, cut this in 37 seconds. The 271, it took it 47 seconds. So I don't think that's a real measurement. I think the 11 seconds I got on the first cut tells you it should have been about 33 to 35 seconds for 3 cuts. So not sure why it wasn't running as great there, but that's a real world test. That's what I got on a used saw. So I think what I'll do is start this up again, let it run again, and give it a second chance on this. Let's go ahead and check the 391 the same way, because we're here and why not? So as expected, the 391 cut a lot faster. It even had a disadvantage because the log shifted twice because I didn't have the grapple down tight. But it's not really a fair comparison to these other two saws. It's a little bit newer for one, but primarily the difference is this is in a different price and power range. This saw cost another $100, $120 more than the 271, and we go from 45 cc to 50 to 64, which is a pretty dramatic jump. 2.2, 2.6, and 3.6 horsepower. So it's really not a fair comparison, but I do want to compare the 391 in a future video to a 261, which is in the same kind of price range and is a pro saw with less horsepower. So I think that will make an interesting comparison. Alright, so I ended up making a bunch of cuts with that 271, and like I said a minute ago, I think it's going to need a tune-up. I got a couple of cuts that were quick in the 11-12 second range, and then a couple of the cuts it bogged out and we're looking at over 20 seconds to make a cut. So I don't think that's a representation of the model of saw. It's this exact saw. I love doing these chainsaw comparisons and reviews. I'll probably upgrade to a larger saw for that chainsaw sawmill, and when I do that, I'll give a comparison with my 391. But that's going to wrap up this video. I appreciate you taking time to watch. In just a minute, you'll see links on the screen to a couple more of our videos, and I'll see you next time.